Thanks.
All right, welcome everybody. It's another week with the Transform Parenting Village. And with me today, I've got the lovely Joss Golden, who's an aware parenting instructor and has an immense amount of experience working with parents and helping them to manage life with children. And the theme that we've chosen today is loving limits as another way of looking at discipline. And this is always an interesting topic. And we've had some questions come through with this topic, which are wonderful. And I think we can talk about some of those really challenging situations where you actually don't know what to do in the moment. But I'm going to ask Joss to have a chat with us and talk about loving limits, and then we'll pose some of those questions. Hello, my darling.
Hi, thanks so much for inviting me to come and speak about this. It's something that I really love talking about. And yeah, it's such a common struggle for parents to be facing issues with their children's behavior that they find really difficult, and just being really lost about knowing what they don't want to do in order to respond to their children, but not really knowing what to do in place of that. So wanting things to be different to what we received in our childhood in terms of that quite harsh discipline that many of us were on the receiving end of, but just not knowing how to say no and how to support our children in a way that aligns with the loving parent that we want to be. So I love this term too. So thank you. So I might just get straight into it. Is that okay?
Yeah, tell us about it.
So, I mean, what we're really looking for here is a way to support our children to be their naturally cooperative selves, to be loving to their siblings, to help at home, to respond to us in loving, nice ways. And really, when our children, parenting is so much easier for us, isn't it, when our children are being cooperative and loving and kind, and when they're being uncooperative, inflexible, demanding, aggressive, difficult, all of those sorts of things, parenting often feels really, really frustrating. So I just really want to start off by saying how normal it is for all of us to have these struggles in our family, and how important it is for us to reach out for support when we're going through these difficult times. Because often as parents, we've got lots of stress in the present trying to raise our kids in our little nuclear families without the support that we need. And we've also got lots of our own trauma and unhealed stuff that comes up. And sometimes it's our children's challenging behavior that pushes our buttons and pushes us right back into some of that old stuff. So really, if we want to be responding to our children in loving ways, we really need to be receiving support and help for ourselves, so that we can increasingly get off and offload our pain and our struggles and our stress, and then turn up to be the parent we want to be. So really, with traditional parenting paradigms, what they would view children's behavior as is in terms like children are being naughty if they're misbehaving. Maybe they might say that there's something wrong with them. Maybe we might talk about children like deliberately winding us up or being difficult. There's often this view that children need to be punished when they behave in ways that we find challenging in order to be taught how to behave properly. Maybe we are led to believe that we really need to threaten and frighten our children in order to get them to actually cooperate. And aware parenting has a really different perspective on that. And I remember reading a long time ago that a quote, I think it was from Aletha Salter, but it could have been from someone else, that said, we really need to ask ourselves, what do we want our children to do? And what do we want their reason to be for doing so? And these traditional approaches to parenting really are about inducing fear in our children in order to get them to cooperate or to behave. And that's not what we want in our families. We don't want our children to be scared of us. Then that damages our relationship with them. So I found that quite a helpful place to start when I was starting to do this with my younger children. And the aware parenting perspective is a really different one. So in aware parenting, we see that when our children are behaving in ways that we find difficult or challenging, it's because of what they're feeling or what some of their unmet needs might be, or usually a combination of the two. So we're really seeing behavior as a way of communicating. And that, when our children are behaving in ways that we find difficult and that are struggles for us, it's really a sign that they are feeling distressed and agitated. Perhaps they have some pent-up and unreleased stress and trauma that they're holding. And when they're carrying these painful feelings, it's really hard for them to be relaxed, to be happy, to be cooperative, to be gentle. And so we can see when they're behaving in challenging ways, we can almost imagine them standing in front of us, waving a red flag, saying, Mum, I'm feeling really bad. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I'm feeling really stuck right now. And I'm showing you in the only way I can that I need your help. Please, can you support me? And I find that quite a helpful image, because that keeps us connected to how much we love and adore our children and how much we want to support them, and less likely to go in the moment into that, oh my God, what's wrong with my child? Why are they being so difficult? They're so annoying, and all of those kind of responses that we can go into as well. And with aware parenting, there's this beautiful term, loving limits, that was coined by Marion Rose, who is a level 2 aware parenting instructor. And the idea with loving limits is that we're basically saying a loving no to our children. And at the same time, we're not expecting that they're going to turn around and go, oh yeah, okay, Mum, sorry, I'll stop doing that. What we're expecting is that there's going to be lots of big feelings there underneath that behavior. And so we are welcoming those feelings at the same time. So Marion talks about it as saying no to the feelings, no to the behavior and yes to the feelings. So we're saying, no, I'm not willing for you to behave in that way. And I'm right here and listening. And we have to welcome that when we offer these no's, if we're doing it to support them to release the feelings that are getting in
It's
the way
only just started.
behavior, then there are going to be lots of feelings there that are going to come up. So we have to be able to welcome those feelings. So what we're trying to do is to be as loving as we can, as we gently say, no, sweetheart, I'm not willing for you to do X, Y, and Z. No, sweetheart, I'm not willing for you to have X, Y, and Z. And I'm right here and listening. And so we anticipate that there's going to be lots of feelings, and we're allowing our children to access these feelings that are driving their behavior. And at the time of this behavior, those feelings are really close to the surface, which is why they're being agitated and aggressive and difficult. And so we are right there with them, loving them and supporting them while they cry or they rage. They might have a huge tantrum in response to us saying no. They might have really, really big feelings. They might be very devastated and cry with so much pain. And what we're trying to do is, we don't need to go into fixing. We don't need to go into explaining. We don't need to rationalize or offer an opinion. We don't need to go into judgment of their behavior. All we need to do is hold the space for them while they offload all the big stuff that's there. Oh, sweetheart, I really see how hard this is. I'm right here, darling. I'm listening. And at the end of that process, which might be 5 minutes, it might be an hour, we can observe our children and see, how are they? How are they in their bodies? Are they relaxed? Are they connected to us? Are they loving and cooperative? Are they being soft and gentle with their sibling? Are they being kind to the dog? And so we can really see, wow, okay, it was those big feelings and all that stress that they were holding that was causing them to behave in these ways. And by providing them with a loving no, and then the space to offload all the feelings, we've really supported them to come back naturally through these natural mechanisms that they have to release stress, through tears, through rages, through tantrums, and come back to their relaxed selves. And so
Joss, can I just clarify then? So what you're saying there is that it's because of that pent-up energy, nervous tension, feelings that is causing the behaviour in the first place. And by drawing the loving limit, and then causing them to have a big emotional reaction to that, you're helping them to offload the stress that gets built up in their little systems. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I'm not going to go into too much detail around the what's happening in their nervous systems in these moments, and I'm happy to talk about that another time if people are interested in learning more about that. But yes, that's essentially what's going on. We're saying no in a loving way, and we're saying yes and welcoming all the feelings that we know are there. And if we say no to a child in a loving way and there aren't any feelings, and there isn't a big response to that, then that's great. We know that there aren't any feelings there. But if we say no in a loving way and our children have big outbursts in response to that, we can see that's because there's lots of stress and agitation sitting there. And the kindest, most loving and beautiful thing we can do all that. What we're doing, there's a bit of a distinction between when our children's behavior is aggressive and when our children's behavior is more sort of demanding and inflexible. And so one of the questions that you sent me was around aggression, and we can talk more specifically about that one. But what we're doing when our children are being aggressive is the first thing we need to do is to set the limit in a really loving way. So if our children are hitting, for example, we need to stop the hitting, because our children don't want to hit. They don't want to be aggressive. They don't want to hurt us. And so if they're going into that behavior, it's not because there's anything wrong with them, or because they're naughty, or because they don't understand that it's not okay to hit someone. It's because they're so overwhelmed by the feelings that they cannot contain that energy anymore. And so they're hitting out. So the first thing that we do is move in with the limit. Sweetheart, I'm not willing for you to hit me. So if a child is hitting, we might hold them off us so that they can't hit us. Or we might very gently hold their hand so that they can't hit. Perhaps if they're grabbing a toy off another sibling, we might gently hold the toy so that they can't grab it. And we're using the minimum amount physically to stop the behavior. And then we're saying at the same time, no, sweetheart, I'm not willing for you to hit, and I'm right here and I'm listening. And we keep holding that space and holding them, if necessary, to stop the aggression. And then we're allowing all the feelings to come up. And if instead our children are being really, really demanding and inflexible, I want another story. No, please give me another story. Or more chocolate. I want chocolate. I must have chocolate, or whatever. We can see that what we want to do in that moment is to move in with the empathy and then offer the limit. So it's a little bit of a subtle distinction. So if our child is saying, for example, I don't want to switch off the TV, I want to watch another episode of Bluey, we would move in and connect with them first. Oh, sweetheart, I really see how much you love watching Bluey. It's such a good show, isn't it? And then we would offer the limit. I'm not willing for you to watch anymore now, and I'm right here and listening. And then we would switch off the TV, and we would be with them while they had a big outburst about how unjust and unfair it is that we've just switched off the TV. And then at the end of that big outburst, again, we're not having long conversations with them while they're expressing big feelings. So we don't have to go into this long explanation if they're saying, but why, Mummy, why can't I have one more? Why can't I have one more chocolate? But Mum, that's so unfair. Or they might go into, you're the worst mummy in the world. I hate you. And we don't need to go into big explanations of that. We just need to say, oh no, sweetheart, it's really hard for you right now, and I'm right here with you. And if we have big feelings in response to their behavior, particularly if they're being aggressive, that often brings up lots of stuff for us. We might be going into, what's wrong with my child? I've failed as a mother. Oh my God, my child is out of control. Or, that there's something seriously wrong with them or me, or we might be getting judged by other people about our children's behavior, and we might be going into that sort of talk. And so when we have those big feelings ourselves, it's really important to reach out for support for us outside of that moment, so we have spaces to get support, to share our worries, to share the big feelings that are coming up for us in parenting. And if our kids say, I hate you, Mummy, you're the worst mummy in the world, that might be really hurtful for us. And so when we have spaces to take that hurt elsewhere, we can increasingly show up for our children, not reacting to what they're telling us or saying in the moment, but responding to what we can see that they really need.
So I'm really glad you've brought that up, Joss, the understanding that, we too have big feelings. And I think it's, we come into this role as parents feeling like we should know what we're doing and we should have all the answers, but we're growing as well with our children.
Absolutely.
And when you look at the way children are, and then you look at the way adults are and how they deal with their big feelings, we are no different.
No.
We need people to hold space for us to just be who we are, to give that empathic connection of, I can see you're really finding this difficult right now, and then be able to hold the space for our big feelings. This is a sort of thing you can bring into not just your relationship with your child, but your partner and people close to you. Holding space for those big feelings is not an innate, natural thing that we often even acknowledge or allow ourselves to do. But what you're saying in what you've just described there is, by doing that for yourself, it means you can hold space for your children to have big feelings without reacting.
Yeah. Absolutely. And often saying no to our children, as I said at the beginning, is a really hard thing for us. And it often brings up lots of things. And being with our children's big feelings brings up lots of things for us too. And so it's really helpful. I mean, Aware Parenting, we have a concept called listening partnerships where we offer, we swap listening time with another parent, where you might have like half an hour on the phone, for example, where you would just share whatever's coming up for you. And then your partner would be listening and just reflecting back to you what you're saying. And then you swap. And this is really important because, you know, often saying yeses and nos brings up lots of stuff for us around our childhood. Like, how were we responded to? How were limits in our family? What did that feel like for us? What did we really need as children in that time? Can we deeply connect to what is a true yes for us and for our children? Because often, like, if our children are saying, oh, but please, mommy, I just want to watch one more episode, we might be thinking, oh, I don't really want them to, but oh, maybe I could just let them. And I don't know, or am I being a terrible mother? Have they had too much screen time today? Or maybe, you know, all of those questions and worries and doubts and feelings. And so having a safe space to be able to share that, to be able to reflect on what the experiences were like for us as children. You know, what do we want our children to feel about us? What do we want our relationship to be like for them? What's getting in the way of us offering limits in a loving way? What are we feeling in our bodies when we say no to our children? You know, how can we recognize when our children need these limits? You know, all of these things are really, really helpful. And actually, I think loving limits is the hardest part of this way of consciously parenting our children, to really embody and to really offer. And initially, I really understood the concept, but I was so triggered into my own stuff that my limits would not be very loving. And, you know, I would get.
Can you tell us about that, Joss?
Yeah. So I would often I would be so triggered by my child's behavior that even though I understood that I wanted to be a loving parent and to be offering limits in a loving way, I would go into anger, shouting, rage, upset, blame, shame, even though that's really not what I wanted to offer my child at all. And that was just my stuff coming up and being triggered in the moment. And often our children's, particularly their really challenging behavior, pushes us right into that stuff, doesn't it? That's when our mama rage comes out, and we're like surprised at ourselves sometimes that we've had such huge reactions to something that's quite small, or particularly around aggression. And so, yeah, I would respond with harshness. And then as I got more aware of this and started to have my own space to be doing my own healing work more and more, I was able to not react harshly more of the time. But then I lost the limitness of it all. And I would start to be too permissive because I didn't want to be mean, because I was like, oh, but I've been mean and harsh to my children in the past, and I never want them to experience that again. So I'm just going to say yes. And then I would feel quite resentful and really struggle with that too, because I was saying yes to things that weren't a yes for me. So it really requires us to be unpacking lots of stuff, getting support, having listening, having sessions to get really clear so that we can do the limit and the love at the same time to support our kids back to balance.
I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's where we actually come unstuck, is recognizing our own triggers and what sort of work we need to do to unlock our own nervous tension around certain situations and things that happen with our children. One of the questions I often ask in my coaching sessions with people is, what is your relationship to the word no? How do you go saying no in your everyday life at work? How do you go saying no when they want you to do extra work and perhaps there's somebody else who could do it and you tend to say yes, yes, yes? What is your relationship to saying no? And I think for women particularly, it is very, very difficult to say no in our own in our own life, let alone being able to say no to a toddler who's about to have a meltdown in public, and we know that when we say no, it's going to make that next sort of period of time really difficult and potentially embarrassing. But to hold space for the outcome of being able to say no, this is something that I think is intrinsic to a lot of parents' challenges. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, most of us were raised in families where our feelings weren't heard. Where if we had big feelings and distress and anger and trauma and difficulty, we were shamed or sent to our rooms, or love was withdrawn or whatever. So lots of us have lots of unheard feelings still sitting inside. So we do get reactive to our children. And secondly, most of us didn't have our needs respected or understood when we were children either. So we didn't get to express a yes or a no as a child. We didn't get, we might have expressed that and then we might have been punished, or maybe nobody listened. And so we very quickly learned as children to disconnect from our needs and disconnect from our intuition and our voice and what we were really feeling and needing in the moment. And so we become, we grow up to be adults who are still really disconnected from our needs. And there's nothing quite like parenthood to push us into having lots of unmet needs. And if we're not even aware of them, it's a really difficult place it's a really difficult process to go into. And so, I think the more that we can have spaces to think about these things, and the more that we can connect in with what we truly want in that moment. And often I think that's the first step with loving limits. And I've got this really simple little meme about it that I will send you, Tracy, that you can share with your group. But the first step often, I think, is checking in. Is my child's behavior showing me that they have big feelings right now? Are they being aggressive, difficult, demanding, inflexible, whatever? And if the answer to that is yes, then the second step is to check in with ourselves and to say, do I have capacity right now to support them with that? And can I get clear about what they really need? What is it that I think is really going on right now? And do I have it in me to offer them a no, and to listen to all the feelings that are going to come? And it's a practice, it's a real practice to respond to our children in these ways. It's a complete shift of the way we respond to children and the way that we think about behavior. So it takes a lot of practice and lots of self-compassion in that practice. As I said, it was a difficult journey for me. And now loving limits, and my children now are 19 and 17, but loving limits is something that I still use in my family, but now it usually moves into play really quickly, because my daughter, if I say to my daughter, sweetheart, I'm not willing for you to do that, and I'm right here and listening, she'll say something like, yeah, well, Mama, I'm not willing for you to not be willing for me to, and then it just becomes a sort of joke kind of thing. But it's a process, definitely.
Yeah. And have you seen that reflected in your children, in how they are able to hold space for other people?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think the thing with loving limits as well is that when we start to embody this, we can also offer these to ourselves when we are starting to go into behaviors that we perhaps don't want to be. So, perhaps we notice ourselves getting really triggered by something that our children are doing, and we can just learn to pause for a moment and to just offer ourselves lots of love without the judgment or the criticism of ourselves, and to just go, actually, I'm not willing to respond like this right now. And I'm going to just give myself some love and some listening about the feelings that are there that are causing me to behave in this way with my children. And so we can actually start to embody the process for ourselves. And I definitely can see that in my kids. Absolutely. Yeah. And they're really aware of when they've got big feelings increasingly, or when they're behaving in a way they're aware afterwards that they were behaving like that because they had big feelings. So it really supports that connection to self for us and for them.
Yeah. And I love what you've said about it being a practice and an embodiment, something that we over time start to embody. Can I ask, is this relevant for babies as well?
Well, yes, we can offer loving limits to our babies if we, this is probably a huge topic to touch on here.
Yeah.
And it's something that can be quite difficult to really understand initially. But again, what we're doing when we are responding to our children in these ways is we're trying to really tune in to what we think our children's behavior is showing us that they're needing right now and feeling right now. So with babies, for example, it's very common for them to have lots of feelings, even at a very young age, because birth is difficult. And then as soon as they're born, they have so many intense experiences and require time to process that. And so from aware parenting, we see babies crying for two reasons. One is to express an immediate need. I'm cold, I'm hungry, I need to be changed, whatever. But the other is to express feelings and to offload stress too. So if we've met all of those physical needs and our babies are still crying, we would see that in aware parenting as being a sign that they're trying to offload stress. And so we listen to the tears. And where the loving limits come in is if we have inadvertently distracted them from expressing feelings, perhaps by breastfeeding them when they weren't hungry, in order to suppress feelings and to stop them crying, or perhaps that might be giving them a dummy to stop them crying, then that can be a place to offer some loving limits to a baby. And again, using the same language, I think babies are capable of understanding so much non-verbally and verbally when we communicate with them. So we might decide that we don't want them to have a dummy anymore. So, for example, we might just tell them if they're crying, I know, sweetheart, you've got big feelings right now, and I'm right here and listening, and I'm not willing for you to use the dummy anymore. Or it might be that we've breastfed them and we know that they're not hungry, and perhaps it's bedtime and they start to cry a lot, and we can just lie down with them and be there with them whilst they're crying. And it's always in loving support with in aware parenting, never leaving a child to cry on their own or a baby to cry on their own. But we might lie down with them and say, I'm right here, sweetheart, and I'm listening. We're not going to have any more baby now. And I know you've got lots of feelings and I'm here to support you. So that might be a way to offer loving limits to babies. But yeah, that's probably a big topic that needs, that's got lots of subtle layers and nuances to it that probably need to be teased out more than we can do just here.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. Now, Joss, some of the questions that have come in, I'm just going to read them to you now.
Yeah.
This is from Joe. I have a question: how to respond in the moment when your child hits or bites you. Liam bites me when he is expressing his displeasure about a limit I've set. Or, for example, if I'm taking him to change his nappy and he doesn't want to get his nappy changed, he will try to bite me.
Yeah. So that one comes up a lot. It's really common, Joe. And I'm sending you lots of love, because it's a really hard one to respond to in a loving way. And often there's nothing quite like being hurt ourselves for us to go into that kind of tense response to our kids. So yeah, lots of love and compassion to you with that. And this is a perfect time to use a loving limit. So what you might do is to let him know that you are not willing for him to hurt you, to bite you, or to hit you. And so if he's moving in to try to hit you or to bite you, it might be a time to hold him off you. Perhaps you might have a cushion between you and him so that he can't get close to bite you. And again, the key thing is to be staying as loving as you can, making eye contact, using a soft, loving tone of voice, and to be holding that limit, and then offering him the space. Sweetheart, I'm not willing for you to bite me. I can see that you're really upset, and I'm right here and listening. And so if it's a nappy changing situation, for example, you might still take him towards where the nappy's changing area is. And you say, sweetheart, I know you really don't want to have your nappy changed right now, and I'm here and listening, but we are going to change your nappy. And it's not that you're going to force him or like hold him down to change his nappy or anything like that. You're just going to keep reminding him that that's what he's there for, and that's what you're going to do, and listen to all the feelings that are going to come out in response to that. So I don't know if that's enough.
So in that situation, if he's kicking and really resisting getting, lying down and getting his nappy changed, and you said you wouldn't hold him down, what would you do?
So I would just keep holding the space. So for example, if my children had big feelings like that, and they might have a tendency, if it's a nappy change, for example, they might have the tendency to run away. So I would probably take him, I might even put the nappy change station in a room where there wasn't much like a bedroom, for example, where there's just some mattresses on the floor maybe, or a bed. And I would take him in there and I would close the door, stay in with him, get down on the floor, maybe with my back to the door so he couldn't run away if that's what he was trying to do. And I would just keep saying to him, sweetheart, it's time to change the nappy now. I know you really hate it. I'm right here and listening. And so you're not actually going to do the nappy changing until the child has offloaded all the feelings, but you are reminding them that that's what's going to happen to keep them connected to the distress sort of thing. So like in aware parenting, we have this concept of the balance of attention. What we're trying to do is offer them the safety. I'm right here with you, sweetheart. I really see how hard this is. I know you really don't want this, darling. So the love, the safety, the connection, and the connection to the distress at the same time. Oh, sweetheart, we are going to change your nappy now. And so you don't actually do the nappy changing until all the feelings are out, but you are reminding them that that's what's coming so that they keep connecting to the feelings that are there and offloading the feelings. So then you'll find at the end of that process, he'll lie down, he won't bite you, and he'll willingly have his nappy changed. But you have to go through this process of allowing him to offload all the feelings in the meantime. So you anticipate it's going to take a long time the first time you do it. The second time you do it, another time when he's got big feelings, it may take a long time too. But at the end of that process, the more you're holding this space for him, the more cooperative he will be around nappy changing.
Yeah. Mary's come in and said, Thomas is the same, plus kicking and throwing, just turn 2.
Yeah.
Kicking and throwing, same deal?
So same deal. If there's kicking, you might have to like gently hold the legs. And sometimes that requires us to be really attuned into ourselves. If we're finding ourselves going into being a little bit hurtful, that we all do. Sometimes if we're really wound up and triggered by our children's behavior, especially around kicking, hitting, biting, that kind of thing can be difficult. So if we're finding ourselves being deliberately overpowering our children, it's time to just take ourselves away for a moment and calm down. But if we're feeling loving and connected, we might hold his legs. Sweetheart, I'm not willing for you to kick me. And you might just hold his feet so he can't. And again, that this requires us to be really embodying that no. And when we offer that no from a really embodied space, I'm not willing for you to kick me, sweetheart, and I'm right here and I'm listening, that will contain that behavior. But the key is to keep everybody safe and to be reminding them that you know that they don't want to hurt you, that and that you will support them so that they don't. I know you don't want to kick me, sweetheart, so I'm going to hold your leg so that you can't do that. That kind of thing. And the throwing, the same thing. You might hold the toy, you might hold their arm, you might hold their hand, but you're not grabbing the toy out of their hand and saying, no, I'm not going to let you throw that. You're holding the toy with them in their hands. Sweetheart, I'm not willing for you to hold the toy, to throw the toy. I'm right here with you and I'm not willing for you to throw that.
That's beautiful.
So it's a different energy.
It is a different energy. And what's coming to me listening to you as well, Joss, is the understanding of when you do say things like that to your children, how is that feeling inside of you? Because there's a difference between, I'm not willing for you to throw that, and I'm not willing for you to throw that. It's being able to step into your own sense of conviction and your relationship with the limit is often the biggest challenge. And children pick up so much more on what they sense from what we say rather than what we actually say.
Absolutely.
They're tuning in to the conviction and the vibration that you have within you in how you are speaking to them. I often found with my own sons, the more clearer I got on the limits and was able to communicate really clearly, just like you are in this session, the less resistance the children had because they really knew that that was the limit. Whereas sometimes I think we can waver between limits. We can be a bit inconsistent with limits. We can, have a good day where we can hold it, and other days we're just, doing well to string a sentence together. So we do have those days where we can't step as fully into that conviction. But I think also practicing that type of language and rehearsing it within your own mind and within your own looking at the mirror, of really being able to hold that limit within yourself, like we talked about with your relationship to no, because I think that can be a real challenge. Yeah.
And I think as well, that's so important, Tracy. And I think sometimes, particularly when there's aggression there, it can be really, really helpful for us. I mean, obviously in the moment we have to contain it, but sometimes it's as simple as just standing or sitting on the ground and just like really connecting with the ground underneath us and feeling that sort of solidity in ourselves connected to the ground. Sometimes it's just putting a hand on our heart and giving ourselves some love and some compassion in the moment. Sometimes it's making sure that we have a glass of water on hand so that we can just tend to ourselves in that moment, and to take a second to just take care of ourselves. But just whatever we can do. Sometimes it's having a wrap that we wrap around ourselves to feel that safety and that connection to ourselves. But whatever practices we can do to stay really solid and really clear and really loving at the same time.
Yeah. Thank you. Diana. Sorry, no. Let's go. Annabelle, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is setting limits with my 10-month-old who is now crawling and havoc wreaking. I'm not sure he understands the nuances of why and options, but just saying no doesn't feel right either.
Yep. Well, that's, it's a difficult thing. And I think sometimes we can get fixated on this idea that if we give our children information, they will change their behavior. So if we explain to our child, I'm not willing for you to put your finger in the electric plug, they will stop putting their finger in the electric plug and exploring it. And sometimes, of course, it's really important to give the information. That is part of the picture. We want our children to slowly be able to understand these things in the world. But if our children are continuing to behave in a certain way after we've made it clear that we don't want them and we've explained why we don't want them to be doing it, then we can be really sure that it's because there is some stress and some feelings there. And so it's not just the no, it's the space holding in response to the no that is so important. So if he is wreaking havoc, then perhaps it might be helpful to move in a loving way and to take him off somewhere. Again, take him off into a space where you can hold that space in a really loving way. And it's not that you're punishing him and taking him away and making him feel, making him wrong for whatever he's done. You're just holding him in a space, not literally holding him, but you're containing him and allowing him to offload the feelings that are getting in there. Because again, there's a difference between our children exploring with curiosity their environment and them actually destructively wreaking havoc on it. And so if you can see the difference in them, and it's more of a gentle curiosity that you can say, sweetheart, I'm not willing for you to go and do that because it's dangerous, but let's go over here. And that works, then that's great. But if there's that sort of havoc, destruction energy, then we can be pretty sure that there's some big feelings there. And so the best thing we can do for them and for us in that moment is to offer them a limit and to support the release of the feelings.
And potentially, a little crawler like that at 10 months old is potentially trying to release tension in their system by being very active and very physical. Yes. So the other thing I would say in this case, Annabelle, is childproof. I was very clear that I was happy for my children to go through drawers and cupboards, but I always had the safe things down low and the not so safe things up high. Because that was sort of part of their natural desire to learn and curiosity. And then sometimes that wreaking havoc type frenetic energy is once again them trying to release that tension in their body. So putting them somewhere where they can really, crawl around on a trampoline and have a bit of a jump or get in the sand pit or something like that can just help them through their own physicality release that frenetic energy. Yeah.
Absolutely. And especially when our children are going into that more sort of aggressive, destructive energy, it's a real sign that at a nervous system level, they've been pushed back into that sort of fight, flight, hyper aroused state. And so that physicality, that their body is telling them either fight or run like hell right now in order to survive this threat. And if their bodies are telling them to do that, then ways that we can find to support them to incorporate those movements, that sort of fighting movement of having a big tantrum on the floor or running around, running away. And yeah, that's a really important part of the releasing process.
Yeah, we did a session recently, Joss, on roughhousing and
Perfect
play. And just when I really dug into that topic, I thought, gosh, had no clue the implications that can have on children being able to regulate and how important it is for their little bodies.
Yeah, lots of big, boisterous, active play is really, really helpful when our children are being aggressive. Probably not in the moment, but if our children are tending to behave in that, respond in that way, then bringing in lots of big extra play where they get to hit you with a pillow and knock you over, or push you off the bed, or chase you and catch you, and then you try to chase them and you can never quite catch them, or all of those kind of big games where they're able to move physically and to feel strong and powerful at the same time are really helpful to release lots of these parts of the feelings of powerlessness or frustration or fear, or all of those things that all of our children inevitably will experience. So yeah, that's a big part of the process too. And sometimes we offer limits and they offload some feelings, and then there's some play and laughter that spontaneously happens. And so just going with the flow of that is part of the process. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm just going to open it up to the people we've got here today. And I think they're all females. Hi, girls. Is there anything you want to ask Joss while we're on this call? Thank you for logging in. Have any of you had experience doing this? Hope, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, what do you do in public when things like this happen? I suppose you do the same thing, but like when you're in a confined space, how do you, in a space where you can't take them aside or you can't separate, I'm thinking more in terms of my 2-year-old is doing a lot of like yelling in public and a lot of really loud screaming and that kind of thing, and I don't quite know how to remove them or express to them that we don't really yell in public when we can yell at home. So I suppose that's the only thing that I'm thinking of at the moment, because they're great tips to use at home, fantastic, but just when you're in public, like in a restaurant or on a bus,
Great.
Yeah, that's a really hard one, isn't it? It's really difficult, and there's nothing quite like being in public and being on the receiving end of the judgment of others to make it incredibly hard to embody that no. Yeah, I would say, like, generally hope to offering him this kind of listening and responding to him with these sort of playful connections at home will support him to release much of the feelings and make it less likely that he will then be loud and screaming in public, because often when our children are, it's part of that releasing of that energy and that tension through that loud noise for them. So the more of this that we're doing at home, the less likely it is that we're going to have to do it in public. And sometimes in public we just have to do whatever works, and that might be placating them, it might be whatever works to calm our child down or to stop them doing whatever it is that they're doing. And sometimes we do have to take them away. So if we're in a library and they start shouting, then we just have to take them to the car and be in the car with them for a moment. Or it's about survival when you're out in the big wide world, and it's difficult and uncomfortable. But yeah, definitely the more that we are putting the children to release feelings, and the more that we're bringing these elements of play so powerfully healing for them, the less that we're going to have to do that in public.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask you a question, Hope, while you're on? What do you think the screaming is about? What do you think that behaviour is telling you in that moment?
Well, it's mostly happening when we're on the bus, So I'm guessing he's saying that he wants to be playing and he doesn't want to be just sitting there. And it's very funny because I'll be looking at him and engaging, or I'll be reading a book. Like, I'm not just sitting there on my phone. And he goes, Mom, 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 and then starts screaming it. And I'm just like, okay, we use our quiet voice. And I'm like, look, I'm going to read to you, but we have to read in a quiet voice because we're on the bus. And it's just like, it just continues. And then it has happened in restaurants too. But I do, yeah, it must be because, here's Oscar, it must be because he's just wanting to play and he's being forced to do something confined that he doesn't want to do.
In that moment, it can be super helpful then to move in with some playful connection. So if he's sitting on the bus, and I know you are connecting with him, but actually just responding in a really playful way. So if he goes, Mom, 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 you might just move in and say, oh, I'm going to give you so many kisses right now, and give him a big snuggle or something silly and fun and connecting in that moment. Because when we go into sort of explanations of, not using your outside voice inside or whatever, that of course is important for them to understand. But if they've got feelings and you can see that he's wanting that connection from you, responding in that playful way can switch the energy and meet his needs for connection at the same time.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good day.
Thanks, Hope. Is there any other questions people have? While we've got lovely Joss on the phone. Mel?
I guess the only thing, from my side, so I've been doing something similar with Hamish, who's now 4, and I've also got Lexi, who's 1.5. But it's nice that it's reiterated through this aware parenting. Like, I've read a few books around like gentle discipline, and very similar concepts really rang true to me. So it's nice to then, also continue my learning through like with the aware parenting side of things. I guess one thing that we're learning at the moment is kind of adjusting that for a 4-year-old compared to 1.5-year-old, because what we'd start to do what we do for our 4-year-old to Lexi, to our youngest, and then it's like, oh, of course, her brain's a lot more immature, she's a lot more impulsive and things like that. So just tweaking it is just what we're getting used to at the moment, that we're working on. So
no, it's beautiful. And I think it just calls on us to tune in as much as we can to our children and the moment. And yes, sometimes we get into the rhythm with our children of responding to them in certain ways, and then they go and change and grow and transition to something else, and we're like, that's not going to work anymore, right? But I love that. And it's a dance, isn't it? This parenting, it's a dance. We kind of try something, we offer it, we see whether it works, and then we try something else. And often, like you say, with our youngest, we're looking at the fact that they are processing things differently, and they're understanding things differently. And sometimes with our oldest, it's around expectations of them, and we would sometimes have much higher expectations of our older children, and then we kind of have to go, actually they're still a kid.
So there's definitely that side too. Because she can comprehend, my youngest can comprehend so much, but then it's like, oh wait, but she's only little. And then Hamish, he's the older kid, we have expectations, but he's only 4, so
beautiful.
Any other questions from Kate or Rachel? I hope that's been helpful.
I'm wondering if it might be helpful for me to give an example of when I've used this with my children.
Oh yes, please.
If not, unless Rachel did, or sorry, was it Kate? Did you have any questions?
Hello, I don't have any questions. My baby's only 6.5 weeks old, so the information you gave me on baby responding to him is perfect. But yes, I don't have any big parenting struggles just yet.
You're going to be well primed for when you do, Rach.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Josh. That's been really helpful.
Okay, great.
Give us an example, Joss.
An example that I love to offer is when my son was about 2, he wanted a nappy every time he did a poo. and he would use the potty or the toilet for wheeze, or because we live in, Australia, he was running around in the garden weeing. But anytime he wanted a nappy, anytime he wanted a poo, he got a nappy. And at first we sort of got into that habit without really realizing. And then I suddenly realized we were in this stage and had been in it for months where I was still changing pooey nappies completely unnecessarily. And the way he started asking for the nappy was showing me that there were some big feelings there. And I knew that he was capable of using the toilet. So I said to my husband, I'm going to offer him a loving limit around this and support him, because I can really see that there's feelings that are stopping him from being able to use the toilet, rather than anything specific around the physicalness of toileting. And so my husband looked after my little daughter, and I took my son into the bathroom and I offered him a loving limit. And I just said, sweetheart, I know you really love to use a nappy to poo, and I'm not willing for us to use a nappy anymore, darling. We're going to use the toilet now, and I'm right here and listening. And I stayed in the bathroom with him with my back to the door for well over an hour. And he raged and cried and screamed and begged, and just, lots and lots and lots of big, big feelings came out. And I just held the space. Sweetheart, I know, I really hear how hard this is for you. And I really trust you. And I'm right here with you. You've got this. And I didn't say very much. And he cried and he cried. And sometimes he was in my arms, and sometimes he was a bit aggressive. And, there was lots of big, big feelings. And at the end of that process, he cuddled me and I reassured him again. And he got on the toilet and pooed, and that was it. Over. There was never, ever another issue ever around toileting for him, ever. So, sometimes we can use this when we can see that it's a beautiful way to support our children to take the next step in what they want to do and what they want to be able to do, but that for whatever reason there's some fear or some feelings that are stopping them from doing that. So, and it was a big, loud, noisy process, but I was really clear that it wasn't that he needed a nappy anymore. It was just he needed to get the feelings out that were making him reluctant to use the toilet. So that was just an example.
And then afterwards, so much calmer, so much happier. Yeah,
free to use the toilet, have a poo, and then get on with his life.
And aren't we the same as adults? We really are. Good. Joss, thank you so much for your talk today and coming in and guiding our families. I just think this has been such a rich conversation. How can people find you, Joss, if they want some extra one-on-one support? Because Joss is a wonderful coach. She's part of our community as well, and she's on the website, but I'd like you to just let people know how they can follow you, as well as talk about your podcast too, Joss.
Oh yeah, I always forget about that. Yeah, so I've got a website, awareparenting.com.au, and I share lots of stuff on social media as well at Aware Parenting with Joss. And I have lots of articles and free courses and stuff on my website as well. And I have a podcast, Aware Parenting Stories, that Tracy's been on. Thank you, Tracy. Mm-hmm. And I also have an Aware Parenting and Natural Learning podcast that I co-host with Marion Rose around supporting our children's learning at home, and aware parenting too for slightly later down the track if anybody's thinking about homeschooling. But yeah, so you can reach out to me via my website or via social media. And yeah, I have courses and communities and all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
And she works with parents one-on-one. So yeah, it's another great resource for you. And to have something like the Aware Parenting podcast with Joss is beautiful. Marion Rose also has one. Can just keep you inspired and keep you reflecting and yeah, just learning little bits each and every day that you can bring into your parenting and shift into this new paradigm of parenting in a way that can, so we still need to give limits to our children, loving limits to our children, but we can also grow them to respect their own innate capacity to unload their nervous system and to learn emotional regulation, compassion, the capacity to help and support others. I mean, these are the sorts of things that we all want for our children as parents. So a big thank you. It's so lovely. Joss is going to come every month So I've got Joss and Shay coming every month as well. So look out in the What's On newsletters for when they're coming, because we can learn so much from them. And I'm sure you are all a bit sick of my dulcet tones, so it's nice to have other voices.
Thanks, Tracy. I've got just to say, I've got an episode on my podcast, Aware Parenting Stories, about loving limits, which is an interview with Marion Rose, who invented this term. And I also have an episode on my podcast about supporting our children with aggression. So I really invite people to go and listen to those to help with this whole concept and understanding it more, and then practicing.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much.